There we are. Pretty warm handshake. The two of them smiling and shaking hands. Body language is pretty warm, although the signals that we've been hearing from the French president ahead of this meeting have been pretty hardline, suggesting that there's no question of reopening the withdrawal agreement. They're coming over for a quick word, so let's just have a listen to what they have to say.
Bonjour mesdames, messieurs. Je suis heureux de pouvoir accueillir aujourd'hui à Paris.
I'm very pleased to be able to receive Prime Minister, dear Boris Johnson, here today in Paris. Very pleased about your first visit to France since you took office. We had opportunities to talk on the telephone a couple of hours after you took office as Prime Minister, and I'm very pleased that today we have a chance to discuss more. Please allow me to say first and foremost that the relationship between our two countries is essential and immutable, no matter when and no matter the circumstances. It is the case in particular when it comes to foreign policy, defense, and your decision to come to Paris embodies the necessity of fostering this relationship, this privileged relationship. This relationship is anchored in a history, a long history. There are also treaties between our two countries which go beyond the European Union, and there are some genuine commitments and engagements in ongoing crises we have to deal with together, like Iran, the Sahel, the fight against climate change, girls' education. The engagement of both our countries together has always been constant and remains essential. A few days ahead of the G7, our discussions will also enable us to closely coordinate on these matters. Of course, we will also inevitably talk about Brexit, and you know my position in this respect. It is near, and I'm well aware that this is on your mind day in, day out. First of all, my position has always been to respect the sovereign choice made by the British people to leave the European Union. I regret it. Had I been a British voter, I would have made a different choice. But I respect democracy and the wishes of peoples, and I therefore believe that we now have to implement this choice. Then, my position consists in protecting and strengthening the European project, the single market, our ability to decide and to build a stronger and more sovereign European Union. This is the reason why I always worked so that we would never weaken this project in our negotiations and the decisions we have to take. Lastly, it is about preserving and deepening the bilateral relationship, which is very much anchored in history and forward-looking. It is against this spirit that the European Union has at length negotiated an agreement, a withdrawal agreement with the United Kingdom. I will not get into the details of this agreement, and it does not belong to any member of the European Union alone to negotiate or to renegotiate this agreement. But I would like to say that the key elements of this agreement, including the Irish backstop, are not just technical constraints or legal quibbling, but indeed some genuine, indispensable guarantees to preserve the stability in Ireland, to preserve the integrity of the single market, which is the foundation of the European project. And this is very much fully part of this accord negotiated by the United Kingdom and the European Union. In addition, the European Union has always said that it was available to discuss, depending on the wishes of the United Kingdom, our future relationship, which in the end is essential as it is about building our future, our joint future. We will discuss all of that together in a minute, but I would like to say, as a friend and as an ally of the United Kingdom, that it belongs to the United Kingdom alone to decide about its destiny, to decide about the way you will leave the European Union and the basis of the future relationship. We are actively preparing for all the possibilities, including that of an exit without an agreement on the 1st of October. It's not the choice of the European Union, but it is our joint responsibility vis-à-vis our fellow citizens, vis-à-vis our territories and our companies. And we have already prepared for that. But I know, no matter what, that the future of the United Kingdom, considering our history and our values, cannot but be European. Our geography speaks by itself, and I can say with confidence that the future will confirm it beyond the uncertainties that can be those of the present. Ladies and gentlemen, such are the few words I wanted to share with you. Once again, I'm extremely pleased to host Boris Johnson and Prime Minister. Very pleased to have you.
Thank you very much, Monsieur le Président. Emmanuel, thank you, and it's great to be here in Paris, and I thank you for the wonderful welcome. Listen, in view of what you've just said, and in view of your remarks overnight about Brexit, I want to come straight to that particular point. I want to make it absolutely clear to you, Emmanuel, to the French people, that of course I want a deal, and I think we can get a deal, and a good deal. I was powerfully encouraged by our conversations last night in Berlin with our mutual friends, and I know that with energy and with creativity and application, we can find a way forward for all our businesses and our citizens. But as you yourself have just pointed out, Emmanuel, it is vital for trust in politics that if you have a referendum, then you should act on the instructions of the voters. And that is why we must come out of the EU on October the 31st, deal or no deal. And then, of course, we can take our relationship forward. And when I say take it forward, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Emmanuel, that it is a quite extraordinary friendship. At this moment in Mali, French troops are being conveyed in British helicopters as we work together to fight terrorism in the Sahel. As we stand here together side by side at the Elysee, British troops and French troops are side by side in Estonia protecting the eastern borders of NATO. And when Assad's regime used chemical weapons against his own people, it was Britain and France together with our American friends who showed the collective revulsion of the West in taking out those chemical weapons facilities. Together, we built the world's first supersonic passenger aircraft. We built a tunnel under the Channel. And today, we're actually collaborating on genomics that hold out the hope of curing the world's most intractable diseases. At your G7 in Biarritz that you're chairing, which I'm sure will be a great success, Monsieur le Président, the UK and France will work hand in glove, coude à coude, to tackle climate change, to tackle the tragic loss of species and biodiversity, and as you rightly say, to ensure that every girl in the world gets 12 years of quality education. And I think whatever happens with Brexit, it is our joint ambition, UK and France, that we should deepen and intensify our economic interpenetration. And just as French buses, I'm proud to say, ply the streets of London, thanks to the unique openness of the UK economy, it is also a stunning fact that your beautiful TGVs run on steel railways made in Scunthorpe by British Steel. Not a lot of people know that. In fact, the British ambassador didn't know that, until I just told him. But there could be no more powerful metaphor, I think, for the cultural, the economic, the political partnership between our countries. And I'm proud to say that in spite of some of the negative predictions over the last 3 years, our capital city in London remains one of the biggest French cities on earth. And long may it so remain. And I know that, of course, Monsieur le Président, you will want to treasure and support the hundreds of thousands of British citizens living here in France, as much as we in the UK will treasure and support the 3.2 million EU nationals, including French citizens in our country. So let's get Brexit done. Let's get it done sensibly and pragmatically and in the interests of both sides. And let's not wait until October the 31st. Let's get on now in deepening and intensifying the friendship and the partnership between us over lunch, which will follow shortly.
Excellent. Je crois qu'on va prendre deux questions.
Prime Minister Libina, ITV News. What does leaving without a deal actually mean? Does it mean trading on WTO rules for the long term? Or is it effectively back to square one with more negotiations? And in that sense, isn't no deal a bit of a con?
Well,
and Monsieur le President, Angela Merkel showed some flexibility in Berlin last night over the question of changing the Irish backstop. Don't you think you should cut the new British Prime Minister a bit of slack as well?
Well, thank you very much, Libby. Of course, as you know, a great deal of work has already been done to ensure that the transition on October the 31st is as smooth as it possibly can be. And so there are already agreements on aviation, on financial services, many other sectors. And what we want to do now, between in the next 71 days or whatever is remaining, we want to make sure that we do all the necessary work on both sides of the channel to make sure that whether we get an agreement or not, our exit is as smooth and as pain-free as possible for citizens and businesses on both sides. And that's what we're going to do.
Sur la question que vous avez posée,
regarding your question, I said it very clearly by way of an introduction, the backstop, the Irish backstop, as we call it, is a point which has been negotiated in the context of the operation, given the geography of Ireland and the past political situation. So it is an important element which allows us, first of all, to guarantee the stability in Ireland and also the integrity of the single market. These are our two goals. When we talk about flexibility, well, let me be very clear with you. These two goals have to be met. And we therefore have to find a solution that guarantees the integrity of the single market. We have to be able to guarantee to the companies, to the citizens, to the consumers in Europe that we comply with the rules of the European Union. And whatever comes in on a market, it comes from a market which is no longer in the European Union, is controlled. Then there are previous agreements, the Good Friday Agreement. There is also the political and historical situation and the relationship between your country and Ireland. And we therefore have to respect what was negotiated in this respect. And within the context of the past negotiations, we should be able to do some work. As to the first question, please allow me to underline something. We talk about the withdrawal agreement, but no matter what, there will be also negotiation as to the future relationship. It will be another step, and we always handle things in the right order.
Just to make it very clear, Monsieur le Président, that under no circumstances, when you look at the border with Northern Ireland, I'm just repeating a point that bears repeating, under no circumstances will the UK government be instituting, imposing checks or controls of any kind at that border. And we think, and I understand your desire to protect the integrity of the single market. Of course we understand that. But we think that there are ways of protecting the integrity of the single market and allowing the UK to exit from the EU whole and entire and perfect, as it were. And that is what we, and it was very interesting to hear some of the positive noises that we're now hearing about the ways that can be done. We look forward to developing those thoughts in the next few weeks.
Monsieur le Président, Rimontas de Politico, est-ce que vous êtes sur la même ligne que la chancelière allemande?
Do you share the Chancellor's position that is to find an alternative to the backstop in the next 30 days? And Prime Minister, what is your alternative to the backstop?
What Chancellor Merkel said yesterday, and which is in compliance, which is very much in line with the discussions we've had from the very beginning, is that we need visibility in 30 days. So I just answered as to the reality of the backstop. And I believe that this also matches the goal of Prime Minister Johnson. No one will wait until the 31st of October to find the right solution. But if we fail to find the right solution, of course we could not do whatever it takes at the last minute. So we will make the most of this period of time, and Michel Barnier will be part of that, the European negotiator, trying to find solutions without totally reshuffling the withdrawal agreement, because there has always been a lot of work and it's been approved by the 27. On this point, just like Chancellor Merkel, I'm also very much confident that collective joint intelligence, we should always be able, all together, be able to find something smart within 30 days if there's goodwill on both sides, and I believe there is. I've always been presented as the hard boy in the band, in the group. But it's just that I've always been clear. A choice has been made, and a choice was made, and we cannot just ignore it. We will have to implement a decision taken by the British people and cannot walk around it. And I want to be efficient, and so this is what I said last spring and in the past. I very much want all of us to find a solution. That being said, I can be very clear. We will not find a new withdrawal agreement within 30 days, which will be very different from the existing one. It is just that what Michel Barnier has negotiated can be amended while complying with the integrity of the single market and the two goals I mentioned. Then we can find a solution. If not, it's probably a political issue, a political decision to be taken by the Prime Minister. It will not be our decision.
Of course, understand very clearly that what I think what Angela Merkel was saying last night, if I got her correct, I think I was standing next to her, she said, if we can do this in 2 years, then we can do this in 30 days. And I admire that can-do spirit that she seemed to have there. And I think she's right. I think that the technical solutions are readily available, and they've been discussed at great length. You can have trusted trader schemes. You can have electronic pre-clearing for goods moving across the border. I just want to repeat one crucial thing. Under no circumstances will the UK be putting checks at the frontier. And we don't think it's necessary from the point of view of the EU to do that to protect the integrity of the single market. We think there are other ways of doing that. We've got, I think, adequate time to do it. Let's get on and do it. As I say, there are all sorts of proposals that have already been made. I might direct you to an excellent paper that has been done by Greg Hands and other MPs in Westminster from all parties that goes through some of the ways in which you can check for contraband, check for rules of origin, check for stop smuggling, but not have checks at the frontier. That's the solution. And where there's a will, there's a way.
Merci beaucoup. Let's work.
Right, well, there we have it. Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron. Quite a lot of detail in those comments, even as they go into their talks. Lots of warm body language, lots of talk about how the importance of the enduring relationship between the UK and France. Emmanuel Macron acknowledging that he was seen as the hard boy of this process, but saying that he felt it was simply important to face up to the realities. Boris Johnson, interestingly enough, saying that he does want a deal, he does think it's possible. And fascinating to hear there from Emmanuel Macron saying there wasn't going to be a new withdrawal agreement in 30 days, but mentioning that what Monsieur Barnier, the chief negotiator, had been talking about could be amended. Let's bring in Helena Wilkinson, our political correspondent, who is at Westminster. Some differences there, but the two sides clearly wanting to appear positive, wanting to appear as though there were the grounds for some sort of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, the words we heard from the French president yesterday was that there was absolutely no room for renegotiation. The withdrawal agreement would not be reopened. The backstop would stay put. Now, what we just heard from him there, when he first spoke, he talked about the very close relationship between France and the UK, but he went on to say that it had been negotiated, the withdrawal agreement, that's what happens when the UK, how the UK leaves the European Union, that had been negotiated at length, he said. There were key elements to that, including the backstop issue. And he went on to say that it was all to do with the geography of Ireland, that they wanted to preserve the integrity as well of the single market. But it seemed after, when he was answering some questions, as you rightly said, he pointed out, he said, we're not going to find a new withdrawal agreement in 30 days that's different from the current one, but that Michel Barnier would be possibly involved in various discussions in the future. In terms of Boris Johnson, he again said very clearly that he wanted a deal, he wanted a good deal, but he did also reiterate that the UK was coming out of the European Union on the 31st of October, deal or no deal. But just going back to what President Macron was saying, you really got the sense that he was once again putting this back on Boris Johnson, as Angela Merkel did yesterday to Mr. Johnson. He talked about the fact that the UK and France, they were friends and allies, but it was up to the UK to decide its destiny and the way that it will leave the European Union. So the two men now going in to have what's known as a working lunch. They will have lunch, they will discuss various issues, and they also spoke, didn't they, about various international issues that they've got to talk about aside from Brexit. So perhaps tricky discussions still in there. They will be testing for both sides. They very clearly both are aware of how each of them feel about this issue. Can they come to a compromise? Very difficult to see at this stage, but they will have discussions over lunch today. And also we understand they're going to have coffee after that before Boris Johnson heads back.
OK, Helena Wilkinson, many thanks for the latest from Westminster. And joining us now is Sam Lowe, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for European Reform. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. I believe you were able to hear what Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron were saying. What did you make of it?
I think it was interesting that they were slightly talking past each other, and I do fear that throughout this debate we as Brits tend to hear what we want to hear, in that Johnson was sort of responding to Macron's optimism with the idea that, OK, maybe we can renegotiate, whereas Macron was really just reiterating what the EU has been saying for the past few months, in that the withdrawal agreement remains, the backstop remains. Yes, they're happy to write around it, they're happy to make clarifications. We saw them do that with Theresa May. But ultimately, it's on the UK to decide whether it wants to accept the terms on the table or not.
Yeah, we heard there from Emmanuel Macron. At one stage, he talked about the backstop being a genuine and indispensable guarantee both of peace in Northern Ireland and to protect the single market. But he then appeared to suggest later on that there could be some scope for amending the withdrawal agreement.
My reading of that was he was suggesting that there are clarifications that could be made. So to give an example, could there be a supplementary document produced that sits alongside the withdrawal agreement that outlines the means by which alternative arrangements are assessed, who determines whether they meet the set criteria or not, and how they're signed off by the UK and EU? Yes, that's something that could happen. This is something that's been mentioned before, but I certainly didn't get the idea he was suggesting that the backstop could be stripped out or removed.
We heard Boris Johnson saying that he wants a deal and he thinks a deal is possible. How would you rate his chances?
I think at the moment it's going to be difficult, and a lot of that is to do with Parliament, as in it's very difficult to see where there's a majority for any deal at the moment. And a lot of what he was saying, at least to me, seemed to be pitched to the UK audience to make it clear that he is trying to get a deal, and then if it doesn't work out, then it's the EU's fault. And I feel that he's setting himself up nicely for a general election and to try and win back some of those Brexit Party voters. But on alternative arrangements, it was interesting in that he referenced that Greg Hand's report. And the thing that I would mention here is that to accept that report, you have to redefine the earlier December 2017 commitment, which was to no physical infrastructure or associated checks. You have to strip out the or associated checks, because the report produced by Greg Hands is full of checks. They're just not done literally at the border. And I do wonder if checks being done 10 minutes away from the border is going to be any less disruptive than them being done literally on the red line.
Yeah, Boris Johnson talked there about alternative arrangements. He said, look, we've got all these alternative arrangements. We have this report. There are all kinds of different technical things you could do, trusted trader state arrangements, tracking of goods and so on and so forth. Does it not then come down to a political decision as to whether the EU are prepared to accept that those sorts of arrangements could be put in place and that they are then prepared to rethink that backstop?
I don't believe at this point the EU is going to rethink the backstop. But in terms of the provisions that he's being alluded to, so trusted trader schemes, for example, yes, if you're a trusted trader, you could pre-notify your intent to export. There potentially be a check that you had to stop off en route to have performed, or not if there's nothing wrong. But what about those people who don't sign up for the trusted trader scheme because they fundamentally are opposed to any idea of an economic border on the island of Ireland? How do you enforce the border upon them? And the answer is you increase the number of policing, you start to perform raids, you lock people up and you fine them. And my issue here is, are we just trying to find a technical solution for this border issue that somehow ticks a box but actually is just as disruptive as having physical infrastructure? Or are we trying to deal with the fundamental issues at play? And at the moment, doesn't seem to me, and I know it doesn't seem to the Irish, that the British are treating this seriously.